Hello, everybody. It's Megan here. I'm the Healing Foods Coach. I'm so glad you decided to join me to check out this content for this video. So today I want to focus on triglycerides, how they can be a real warning sign that something is going wrong within your body. You know, in this space especially, we talk about how high levels of cholesterol are not necessarily concerning, and that is absolutely true. High levels of cholesterol are not necessarily a concern as long as you don't have other coexisting factors. If your CAC score is in a good range and it's not elevated, high cholesterol is not necessarily a problem. And if you want further information to back that statement up, check out videos by Dr. Philip Ovadia and also Dr. Anthony Chafee. We actually need dietary cholesterol from saturated fats are the best sources. Why? Because that is what we need in order to make hormones in order to keep our body functioning. So higher levels or even high levels of cholesterol are not necessarily a sign of impending doom in our body or in our systems. However, the one thing that I feel as though doctors seem to be getting a little bit more concerned with, but don't necessarily talk about a lot, are triglyceride levels. So triglycerides happen when the liver starts to have so much fat deposited or going through it, it can no longer store it all. And that forces up triglyceride levels. That's a simplified layperson's description, okay? And the two things that seem to be the key factors that affect our triglyceride levels are inactivity and poor metabolism. And those can be results of things like an underactive thyroid. They can be things like being overweight and not moving because we choose not to, or because we have limited mobility and therefore we cannot. So in my case, that's what I was told. My high triglyceride levels, I was told on March of 2020, March 19th of 2020, I was told by a lipid specialist that my triglyceride levels were as high as they were because of the factors which included my subclinical hypothyroidism as well as my diet, which at the time was loads, like 5 to 10 servings of fruit a day, which is a load, and also eating cakes and sugary things and highly processed carbohydrates as well. And what I'm holding here with me, okay, are some old, test results and reports from my lipid doctor that I saw at that time. So let me just bring it back a little bit here. I went in October of 2019 because I wanted to get my bloods, a full blood panel done. I was absolutely positive that I was dealing with an underactive thyroid. The last 2 times I'd been in and had a thyroid panel run, my free T4 levels were abnormally low. They were just under the lower threshold of what they consider an acceptable or normal range. Okay. And my TSH levels were fine, but my free T4 was not. And so I had insisted on in 2019, because my weight kept creeping up, I was continuing to have more and more hypothyroid symptoms, that I really wanted them to test my blood work and my thyroid again, which they did. They also did, because they kind of rolled that into my annual checkup. So they did a full lipid panel as well. And of course, lo and behold, what they discovered was that not only were my LDL levels high, which again was not necessarily an issue, but at the same time, my triglycerides were extremely high. So to give you an idea, okay, I've gone back over where things are at for me. And here it is. From October of 2019, I printed off my old test results that were in my medical file. My serum triglyceride levels were at 4.31 millimoles per liter, which is the measurement they use here in the UK. Not quite sure what they do in other parts of the world, but that's where I was at. But to give you an idea, the range that they deem as acceptable for healthy triglyceride levels, because we all produce some, is between 0.3 and 2.3 millimoles per liter. 2.3 being the highest they accept as in the normal range. My levels are at 4.31. That's almost double the upper limit of what they deem an acceptable amount for a healthy range. And the note beside it from the lab said above high reference limit. And further on in my records, it says there's a note in there from the doctor which says abnormally high, patient to be seen by doctor. So that's where my triglycerides were at in October of 2020. Now, of course, my LDL cholesterol was high. My HDL was actually quite low. And so as per standard protocol, they put me on a statin to help bring down the cholesterol. Now, again, if my triglycerides were within a normal range, if I was not dealing with an underactive thyroid, as well as the fibromyalgia and the chronic inflammation and all the pain, may not have been such a big concern. But it was, so I started on a statin. When I was then seen by these are these official reports. When I was seen by the lipid specialist, so I saw my GP shortly after the blood test came in October, and I saw him, I think it was a week later. He made the referral to the lipids specialist. And so what's that? March 19th of 2020 is when I went in to see the lipid specialist at that time. Okay. Or sorry, March 19th. Yeah. March 19th of 2020. And just to give you an idea, because I had started to cut back a bit on fruit, I cut back my fruit a bit. I wasn't eating quite as many sugary treats. I was trying to go on a reduced calorie diet. And that is likely why my triglycerides went from 4.31 down to 3.17. Okay. Which is also the levels that registered with the lipid specialist. I had to go in for blood work 5 days before my appointment. Okay. And at that time, my triglycerides were at 3.17, which is still high. It's not as bad as 4.31, but it's still high. So it's still concerning. And as I'm looking through the summary report that she sent me and that she sent to the GP, she said that the diagnosis from her, as far as my triglyceride levels, is that it is mainly due to subclinical hypothyroidism and diet. And her recommendations was that I had to cut out further the refined sugar and reduce my fruit intake, substitute those with vegetables. And now that was all that was recommended as far as just lowering the triglycerides. There was nothing about trying to be active because I couldn't at that time. There was no other real major change to my diet other than being careful to avoid refined sugar. Certainly maybe once a week was fine, but not every few days. And as far as fruit, to cut down to 1 or 2 portions a day from the 5+ that I was having, which I was doing. Now, she also made the diagnosis based on because she did the full blood lab panels, including looking at the thyroid panel. And she also was able to diagnose that I had subclinical hypothyroidism, which means it was just under the radar. It was just enough underneath what they would consider for hypothyroidism, but it was still underneath the lower levels allowed, meaning it would be very difficult normally to diagnose it as hypothyroidism based on the standard blood tests that are run and the panels that are done. So I didn't have my free T4s were not completely gone. I had some, but they were quite low. They were below the threshold of a normal range. And so that was something, first of all, if I felt great relief because I'd spent the last few years trying to get any GP to listen to me. Hey, I know my TSH levels are normal, but I'm telling you, my thyroid is not functioning properly. And of course, nobody did. I was told that many of the symptoms I was having was a result of my fibromyalgia. And oftentimes that can happen. Thyroid symptoms, when you have a normal TSH, the thyroid symptoms hypothyroid symptoms that you present can easily be misdiagnosed as fibromyalgia symptoms because they're quite similar. And in this case, that's what happened. So what was her recommendation? Well, first of all, what she specifically states to the GP is statins will not improve triglycerides if the other factors must be addressed. Now, I also was vitamin D deficient, at least certainly for the weight I was carrying at that time. Okay. Now I get more than I need from the animal sources of food that I eat and being outdoors daily. So vitamin D for me is not an issue. But she finishes off by saying to the GP, she may require less doses of statin going forward, that is. But for now, she should continue with them, and the main emphasis should be on vitamin D replacement and normalizing thyroid levels to help improve the body's metabolic rate. So my metabolism was completely out of whack. It did not function properly. And of course, as I later came to learn, that is because my thyroid was not functioning properly. I didn't realize the two were so intertwined and connected, and yet they are. And on top of having an underactive thyroid and therefore metabolism that wasn't effectively running and keeping everything moving into and through and out of my body, that was just making other situations worse. And I would have to change my diet in order to help reduce the amount of triglycerides that were being produced and also reverse the beginning stages of fatty liver disease. So if you are told that you have high levels of triglycerides, that is a clear sign that something is going wrong within your system. It may not necessarily be because you are dealing with an underactive thyroid and therefore your metabolism is not functioning well. But chances are good that could be a factor. Also, the more processed, sugary, sweet, junky stuff you eat, and even if you eat loads and loads of fruit, especially the high carb, super sugary ones, you are just adding fuel to the fire. The reason I say that is if you were to eat a few handfuls of berries every now and again, that should not be a problem. Why? They're low carbohydrate and they have far less sugar in them than many other fruits do. And those are the things that can contribute to increasing your triglycerides. So if you've been told that you have high triglycerides, you can actually improve that through changing your diet. You know how I know this? Because it worked for me. So March 2019, my triglyceride levels, as I said, I'll say it once again, my levels were at 4.31 millimoles per liter, when the accepted range is between 0.3 and 2.3 at the most. And I was at 4.31. I started to cut back on sugary things and didn't have quite as much fruit. So by the time I saw the lipid specialist, my triglycerides were down to 3.17. Okay. Just by cutting those things out or down, which is great. But that was still high. So that was in March 2020. And as of the 1st of June of 2020, I had cut out all sugar, all fruit, most vegetables, and I was eating a keto diet. Did that for 2 weeks, realized I can't unfortunately tolerate any vegetables or really any sort of dairy, but I definitely cut out all the other vegetables from my diet. And so a month in, I was zero carb. And I went back for a follow-up appointment for blood work, which was done on July the 7th of 2020. And just under a year, my triglycerides were radically lower. In fact, let me just get the right page here. My serum triglyceride levels on July the 7th of 2020 was down to 1.95 millimoles per liter after being at 3.17, and prior to that, 4.31. So from October of 2019, my triglycerides were at 4.31, double the accepted allowed amount, down to 1.95 millimoles per liter in July of 2020, just 1 month of going zero carb. Well, low carb to zero carb. Like, that's amazing. So that just shows me, and that just tells me that diet plays such an incredible role. I very quickly reversed my fatty liver disease. Luckily, it was the early stages, so it didn't take very long, but I very quickly reversed my fatty liver disease. My thyroid was starting to perform correctly and functioning well a month in, and I could tell my metabolism was finally kicking into gear. It hadn't worked very well or effectively for years. Again, because I was sedentary, I had put on weight. Of course, by June the 1st, I was 100 pounds overweight at 225 pounds. So I was overweight, carrying excess body fat. I had hypothyroidism. Even though it was subclinical, I still had it. My metabolism was crap. And as soon as I cut out all of the fruit and the sugar and basically eventually cut out all the plants, I got the carbs out of my diet. I didn't have glucose coming into my body. And the dramatic difference in my triglyceride reductions was incredible. And I'm so thankful. And I came across these today, and it just reminded me that, you know what, although having high levels of triglyceride can be very concerning, certainly because you get things like fatty liver disease, you can get like any organ can be overflowed with fat if our triglyceride levels get high enough, which is not good. Okay, we have disease in our organs if we're not careful. But the fact that it could change so dramatically just through diet, wow. And so if you are told that you have high triglycerides, okay, that's okay. I mean, it's not okay. You don't have to panic. Start changing your diet, and you will have almost immediate response and improvement. Like I said, I was barely just a month into keto, and then 2 weeks keto, and then I was 2 weeks carnivore when I got the blood work done. And already my triglycerides were well within the accepted range. And they're probably even lower now because it's been that much longer and I've gotten that much more of the garbage and the inflammation out of my body. Okay, but it's incredible what we can improve and what we can heal just by changing our diets. And I thought it was important to share that with you. So if today I was to find out that my cholesterol was slightly elevated, I wouldn't even worry. I mean, I haven't taken a statin in over a year. I wouldn't worry. And the reason why is because my triglycerides are quite low. I know for a fact that my CAC score is quite low. So even if my cholesterol is a bit high, that's okay. That's not a problem. It just means I am making loads of cholesterol to build all the hormones that my body needs to stay running and be happy. And that's a good thing. So I hope this has been informative and helpful. Now, again, I am not a GP and I am not a doctor or a medical person. So I am not going to, assess you and say, oh, your triglycerides are okay, don't worry. Always speak to your practitioner, okay? Because you may have some other coexisting condition where perhaps your triglyceride levels on their own wouldn't necessarily be an issue, but because you have X, Y, or Z, maybe that is a concern. All I'm saying is that if you're told you need to lower them for whatever reason, you can do that pretty quickly just by changing your diet. So that is the good news. And you don't need statins. In fact, statins have very little effect, if any, on triglycerides. Even if diet is not a factor, and even if slow metabolism, or thyroid issues are not a factor, statins aren't really going to do anything to help improve your triglycerides. But you can change that with diet. So let's prevent that from happening. Let's cut out the sugar, especially the refined stuff that's in junk food. Let's get rid of the super sugary fruit. I would suggest, if you want to have some fruit now and again, eat low carb, low sugar fruits like berries, more so the more sour ones than the super sweet ones, right? Less fructose and glucose that way. So avoid the sugary things. Cut it down, or cut it out. Yeah. So if it's processed refined sugar, cut it out completely. You can do that like today. As far as fruit, you may have to slowly wean yourself off, but ideally you shouldn't really be eating super sugary fruits, because they are going to affect your blood sugar and your blood glucose levels and raise your insulin, which is a storing hormone, which makes it much harder to lose weight if that's constantly elevated, dare I say near impossible. As well as you're also going to be increasing your triglycerides, which is not good, as we've just looked at. Okay, so you want to cut out as much of the fruit as possible. If you want to have some berries now and again, blackberries, raspberries, cranberries even, have those. The more sort of sour or unsweet they taste, the better, because then you're not having such a high spike to your insulin. All right, do that. The other thing is, get rid of the starchy carbohydrates. Cut out all the processed crap, absolutely. First place to start, but then cut out the starchy carbs. Nobody needs potatoes. Nobody needs loads of carrots or any of the other starchy vegetables. Stick with the lower carb, non-starchy ones if you tolerate them. Let me emphasize that, please. If you tolerate them. If you have gut issues and IBS, I would recommend you avoid them completely until you have had some significant healing, and then slowly reintroduce some of them now and then, see how you respond. Okay, so broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, avocado, onions, garlic, tomatoes, mushrooms. Those are the ones that are generally considered safe to eat. But again, if you have IBS, IBD, or other gut issues, you would probably be best to avoid those like the plague. They are going to aggravate your symptoms, and that's never fun. Okay. Do those things, and you can very easily and fairly quickly reduce your triglycerides. This is what allows people to reverse fatty liver disease. Even if it's far along, when you start cutting all the other stuff out, that's going to really help as well. And if you've had it for a long stretch of time, it will take time for it to reverse, but that doesn't mean it won't. Okay. If you're just starting into fatty liver disease, then it will be a fairly quick turnaround. At least in my experience and what I've seen from other people in the space, didn't take them long to reverse it once they got all that sugary stuff out of their diets. Okay. And it's amazing. That's what works. No statin's going to work. No other medication is likely going to work. What works is changing the diet. So if you want more details, if you are interested in getting some one-to-one coaching support, of course, I offer that. You can go to my website and book a session with me, and I would love to help you and work with you, and we can get healing together. That's it for today's video. Thanks, guys, for sticking around and being patient and staying with me. I appreciate your support. See you guys in the next one. Take care and bye for now.